We're going to start with the nominations for chair.
I nominate Michael Spitzer.
I second the nomination.
You ought to call the roll, call the vote.
Call the roll first.
Will we have to do the nominations for secretary?
Yeah. It's unanimous?
Yes.
Very good.
Anyone you heard?
I'd like to thank everyone, but I don't know what for yet. And thank you, Bernie.
Change seats with you?
No. Yours still says the chair, so if something happens, they still hit you.
The nomination
You just
for
got to increase his
Well,
pay.
Okay, I'd like to open up the nominations for secretary.
I nominate Stauffer, our worthy secretary.
I second.
Okay, here, I guess it's unanimous
Unanimous.
because nobody else wants that job.
Thank you. We'll do the roll call now. Okay. So private members, we have Michael Spitzer, our chair.
Present.
Bernard Rosen.
Present.
Mark Kaplan.
Here.
Bud Larson.
Present.
Public members representing Mayor Bill de Blasio, John Grathwall.
Present.
Representing Comptroller Scott Stringer, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
Representing Public Advocate Letitia James, Mr. Umar Khan.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Got everybody.
Good, thank you. I'd like to hear a motion to adopt the bylaws that we currently have.
So moved.
Give me a,
But I do know that, Mr. Kaplan has made some comments that he would like to have them revisited and reviewed, so, we will accept them now and then, review them and possibly change them in the future.
Were there any substantive edits, Mark?
I'm trying to find them, so,
No, they have copies.
but the whole idea was to turn us into a more active group, which would
Right.
trail into the bylaws. And I think that we will have the support of the controller, because I talked about it. So, they could be modernized, but I'm not prepared today to give you all the comments.
Okay,
I know what's going to be on it, I should have paid attention.
no, we'll handle that then, in the future. I'd like to hear a motion to accept the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on March 28th, 2018.
What? You can now make the motion. I move it.
Second.
So moved.
Okay.
Okay, we're now up to the presentation by the retirement systems, and the first one up is the teachers' retirement system.
Good morning.
Hi, Mitchell. Could you please identify everybody that's here with you?
Holy
Yes,
smokes.
yes.
Is it the whole room?
Mitchell Brookter, Assistant Chief Accountant, Teachers Retirement System. We have representative of accounting and internal audit departments. In name, Kate Chen, our Deputy of Internal Audit, Barbara Charskick, our accounting
Is his mic on?
manager, and David Yerushalmi. I think you could hear from the accounting financial reporting unit. So, so we're here to present. I'm here to present the teachers' financials for 2017. It's a combination financials, including the QPP qualified under the IRS 401A and TDA, which is a 403B plan. I'd like to say, I've said this in the past, it's now like the fourth year that these financials have extra disclosures. You have funding and asset allocation disclosures per what's, we got by GASB 67, 68, and it's the third year where we have investment level disclosures per GASB 72. And that's, if you guys have been here over the years, the basic financial statement due to the enhanced disclosures has grown. In terms of teachers' net position, QPP net position as of 6/30/17 stood at $50.1 billion, up from $43.6 billion from year-end 2016. That's 15%. First mentioned on page 4. The TDA net position as of 6/30/17 is 31.1 billion, up from 28.4 billion from 2016, or 9.5%. That's on page 10. So, you know, just going through the MD&A, first presents the QPP and then the TDA. Combined, we're at 81.1 billion. You know, that number's in the city CAFRA on page 180, and it's, you know, combined is what makes us the largest system. In terms of return information, you know, the Russell 3000 was up 18.5% last year. The Morgan Stanley International was up 20.83%, while the New York City Core, you know, fixed return composite was down, was basically flat. On a whole, the pension fund returned 12.5% is one of the required disclosures under the GASB. It's found on page 55. So the 12.5%, you know, is obviously above the expected 7% return, which is, you know, also a disclosure required in GASB. And so it's the 12.5% is greater than the 7%. Over a 10-year period, we were at 5.7% for the pension fund. Over a 15-year period, it was 7.5. You know, the 10 years, you know, in our CAFRA, we have, you know, more. We present the annual 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year returns for, you know, for our funds. Funding status, you know, it's actually, you know, one of the funding. There's a disclosure due to GASB 67, 68. I think it's like 65%. It's on page 47. 68% on page 47. Another funding percentage would have us at 56.5%. That's the entry age method that's founded at the, you know, at the beginning of our CAFRA. We mentioned that. Okay, just as of today, for the record, right, I was going to say that as of March 31st, we were up another 10.5%, but after yesterday, I think we're down to like 8%. Or roughly, you know, we had, let's say, $6 billion more as of March 31st than as of year end. But again, it's maybe $5 billion now. So, in sum, that's, you know, major summary of our investments. You know, we also include in the MD&A different schedules to help readers in different ways. There's actually a new one this past year, which I think our board liked, just to make clearer what investments that are managed by the pension fund versus what's managed internally as you know, primarily for our 403B, but just in general, we have non-pension fund investments. So that's it's on page 15. It has a, you know, breaks down our investments in more ways. So there are many ways to view which, you know, the investments. You know, you have the QPP and the TDA, and then you have these are, you know, pension fund returns and variable return funds. So again, that's page 15 has, you know, breaks it down in different ways. Also, as of note, we did move $3.8 billion in November 2016 as part of an actuarial true-up. It was disclosed in the previous year. It has to do with basically in terms of looking at the expected liability for retirees, and if if the mortality tables used to be used to have a shorter mortality table, so it impacted and created a liability. So we did move a lot of money in November 2016. It did impact the financials for $44 million for TDA annuities. So there is a line about TDA rebalance, but that was 44 million. The 3.8 billion is between different asset classes, so you don't really see it. It's just disclosed that we did have a movement of money in last fiscal year. So that's basically a summary of where we are.
Thanks, Mitchell. Any of the members have any questions? Bernie?
Yeah, it's an overall question for all the systems, and maybe I'll direct it to Mr. Jeter from the Controller's Office.
Wait, before we begin, could everybody from the asset management introduce themselves, and the actuary's office, please introduce yourselves?
Okay, I'm David Jeter, Assistant Controller for Asset Management. I'm joined by Lynn Fleischman and George Savacci.
I don't hear a word, all right. See how to turn it on. Yeah.
And they both can, you can introduce yourself.
Lynn Fleischman, I'm the Executive Director of our Investment Operations Support Group.
George Savacci, Director of Financial Management.
And I'm Mike Samet, First Deputy Chief Actuary.
All right.
I'm Edward Hugh from the Office of the Actuary.
Thank you.
What I noticed in going through the systems is when it comes to the investment of the assets, it varies. At one time, it didn't vary that much. I remember way back when the controller insisted, I think the actuarial interest rate was quite high, 9%, that 70% of the assets be in common stock, in equities, and the rest fixed, whatever you want. I noticed now, I guess my question is it a trustee issue to decide, or is it your office that decides? You got to speak up.
Yeah, so ultimately, each board approves their own asset allocation. What you see happening in the returns is BERS, for instance, has a higher percent of their assets in active non-U.S. funds, and those funds
But that's
are
not my question.
Okay.
My question is, can the trustees decide, or
The
is it
trustees ultimately decide.
the trustees do that decision?
Yes. So
And
they're
you
all
review it, of course.
They're all 65-35, but the trustees make the decision within the 65-35.
And you said, does the Office of the Actuary have any say in it, or
No,
none at all?
right.
It's different.
It's the,
No, it's changed.
like David said, it's a trustee's call as to how the assets are invested.
And
Just-
as I now understand it, for the purpose of purchasing the management services of the funds, that the funds are treated as one for the leverage that you can get with the money managers? Am I right about that?
They are treated as one for us to get the best fee for the city as a whole, yes.
Good. I ask this question every year, and I get I pose the same answer. Do you have a program that enables you to track when one fund is buying and the other one's selling the same security to keep that cost down?
If we happen to have two managers and one is buying and selling and the other is selling, we won't know that. We don't have that analysis.
I can tell you that in some of the major corporate funds, that's being looked at.
Okay. And we are introducing a risk management system. We've begun the beginnings of doing that. I think some of that will become more apparent as we introduce that system.
We actually did that with when we had to move that $3.8 billion. We
No,
actually,
you have to speak into
yeah,
it.
when we moved, we did a like-to-like transition of funds, because we were moving $3 billion, and so we moved it from equities from the pension side to our variable return funds. So I guess in
happens.
specific cases,
It
they
happens.
happen.
Are there any other questions?
Mike, if I may,
Okay.
let me find the questions, because I have several. I know this is accounting jargon, but the reference on page 6 refers to investment income. That's just not investment income. Some of that's appreciation. And it's,
Yeah.
unless there's something that requires it, income is income and appreciation is appreciation. And I don't know why they should be.
Which paragraph?
If you look at the third paragraph on page 6, the second sentence says the $8 billion increase
Yeah.
result of net investment income. And if you read on, what it's saying is that that's the appreciation.
Yeah.
And if you're a layman, you look at income as income and appreciation as appreciation. I think there is something in the accounting rules that give you an opportunity to do it, but I don't think it's
Okay.
telling the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look into if there's a better term. I mean, net investment income is a summary term, you know, I don't want, you know, it's a long sentence as it is, but, yeah, we'll look into a
I'll
better
give you a
term.
couple of Ts. I always like to tease you with that.
Mark, at times,
It's just
those
a question,
terms are used interchangeably,
well,
but I
if
think
you
the term you're
wanted
looking
to-
for is investment return, which is
Yes.
an all-encompassing
Yeah.
type of,
Okay. Then,
I was just gonna, just if I may interrupt,
course.
Mark, very quickly, like on page 7 where you, in the management discussion, what you have to do is separate the net investment income between dividends, interest, and appreciation, and I think you got it.
yeah.
You do it in the big statements, why not do it in the abbreviated statements?
Now, there is a reference on page 14 that says your investments are monitored with extensive benchmarks.
Yeah.
What do you mean by extensive there?
Since,
I can understand you measure them against benchmarks, but I don't understand what the extensive does to that.
okay, yeah, I mean, there are, if you want to go into the details, but, you know, we mentioned for the Bowery Return Fund, is, you know, that you have the Russell 3000 in the S&P, you know, a couple are mentioned on the top of.
What you're saying is you
15.
monitor them against chosen
Yeah.
benchmarks, but there's no
Yeah.
such thing as an extensive benchmark.
Mitch,
Uh,
would you just be
yeah.
reacting to the fact that there are many
Yeah.
benchmarks that we use, as opposed to, I think he just means that there's many benchmarks.
Many rather than
Many,
extensive. I
yeah.
think that's right.
Yeah.
Then, I think on the next page, you refer to the collateral as being invested in short-term bearing funds. The collateral, if you get collateral and it's not cash, which is very often you do get it, you in effect borrow against that to invest. But the collateral itself is typically securities or something, and you don't then invest that in turn in short-term funds. As a matter of fact, there was a while when you invested the collateral in something that didn't work well, and you ended up losing money. So I think this is not correctly stated.
So Mark, I believe, so the collateral that, and Mitchell, you can stop me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong. I think they're referring to we receive cash as collateral.
Correct.
That's actually reinvested in short-term, in treasuries and
No, I understand that,
short-term
but
agencies.
sometimes you get securities collateral and you walk.
Yes.
So here you're talking about investing collateral. What if the collateral is securities?
If it's securities, it's not reinvested, to
So,
your point. We can
this
make,
language should
we
be-
can clarify
Yeah.
that.
And the other question I always ask is, who watches the margin for you?
The
bank?
securities lending agent is responsible for watching the margin.
Okay. Half a minute, I'm just flipping pages, I'm sorry to be slow.
Does anybody else have any comments as Mark's looking?
No, I was just going to ask, like, again, on 29, where you list your asset allocation percentages, and then when you look at page 14, you do break down what's fixed income.
Right.
I don't know, a lot of that stuff I wouldn't necessarily consider fixed income. I don't know, bank loans, tips. Starting from the 10.9%, it'll come pretty close, excuse me, to the 34%.
I mean, I mean, yeah, I mean,
That's generally thought of, anything with an interest rate in it.
I mean, the page 14, is a policy index.
Because it has a fixed interest.
Interest rate, and they may be riskier than other fixed income.
Yeah.
Like junk bonds, but nonetheless, it's fixed
I
income.
have a lot of high-yield bonds, I don't know.
Yeah.
It is a pension fund.
So Bernie, sorry, I mean, sorry.
No, no, it's okay, go ahead.
No, so each system, in the case of teachers,
I'm sorry?
each system has a pension consultant that they work with to develop the asset allocation and that actually recommends the securities that
Yeah.
they invest in.
All right.
So, but to Mark's point, anything that has an interest rate
It's a fixed.
is a fixed income in this case.
Just a clarification, is teachers invested in hedge funds?
No.
No? Okay, so just on page 48, under asset classes, under alternatives, it lists hedge funds in parens.
On page,
All right.
I mean, yeah, it's,
So that note comes from our office that's used across, so we'll make sure that we tailor it better for the individual. In general, hedge funds would be the alternative asset class.
Right,
So
but
we can make sure we make that edit.
Right, but
before
with
we
like
send it out.
NICERs and teachers.
And, yep, we could fix that.
Mark?
Let's come back to something here. Turn to page 27, where we're talking here on accounts payable. Accounts payable is principally comprised of amounts owed to the systems bank for overdrawn bank balances. How does due to depositories and unclaimed funds relate to overdrawn bank balances?
I mean, unclaimed funds is a liability. Any check that's not cashed is a liability, so,
I understand that. So you're saying it becomes an account payable?
yeah, and once the, until the cash is cleared, it's,
So
it's a demand
You have an overdrawn
account.
bank account because they're unclaimed funds? How can that be?
It's an accounts payable.
No,
With,
if what you have is an overdrawn bank account, I understand, bank the difference, but you say that's due to unclaimed funds. Yet your account would be less overdrawn if you didn't have unclaimed funds.
the balance here is when we
Is it outstanding checks?
it's outstanding checks, which where the funds are kept in the main investment account until the checks clear.
I understand what it is, I just think
So-
that due to is a problem. All right, if
Okay.
everybody else hasn't got a problem with it. Then let's move on to intra-fund payables. The assets are reflected as of year-end. What does that mean? Are valued at year-end, or what's the concept of reflected?
Reflected intra-fund payables.
Am I reading something into that that's not there?
Are reflected as of year end.
No, I understand what you're saying. You take a look at what they're worth and you put them on the balance sheet. But why is it reflected as distinguished from other word?
It's what's excluded is we have investments in our pension fund and variable funds, and there's always a cash flow going between these two funds. So there's a payable and receivable, and that's what's excluded.
I understand
Yeah.
what's going on. I just say I've never seen the word reflected referred to that. If you're comfortable with it, I quit.
Shouldn't it be reported?
I think it's something like that.
Okay, noted.
I think reflected should just be reported.
Quotation lets the following type of securities, short-term securities. Then there's, if you can switch over to page 28, the contract with the fund's custodian require the agent to indemnify the funds. For what? You're missing a part of a sentence there.
Okay, we can better clarify where they're indemnifying us for losses. Okay.
And then it refers to the agent here, any shortfall before I guess that next sentence explains it. Any shortfall before the replacement security cost and the collateral value. Is it before this replacement cost, or any shortfall between the replacement cost and the collateral value?
Covered by the agent. So this is after any incident.
Well, take a look at the language there.
Okay. Okay, we can get better clarity here. Okay, thank you. We'll take that.
And then I'll quit soon. Then, 29 is something I was in the business for a while. The second paragraph says that the assets are diversified over a range of investments, multiple strategies are used to limit. If I were writing a prospectus, I'd say attempt to limit, but that's, nothing is perfect here.
Okay.
And then the next paragraph, you say the asset allocation per investment program. I'll give you this. You can take a look. Some of the language is not financial statement
I
language.
have a question on page 29, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Where you explain in the opening paragraph about the investments in accordance with the state retirement and social security law, your last sentence says, investments up to 25% of total assets of the qualified pension fund and the TDA program may be made in instruments not expressly permitted by the state RSL. Is that true for all the systems, Mr. Jetta?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes. So we monitor the 25% and make sure that they stay under the 25%, but we do monitor
That they stay within the 25%, that they don't move above it?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Some of the stuff in the 25%, even for them, doesn't sound right, but all right, we won't go into it.
I always ask this question. You refer to the fact that you don't have any one investment with more than 5%. You do have in U.S. government securities. I know you don't count that, but that statement is literally not true.
What page are you on?
30, last sentence.
Okay. We'll try to think of a better way to say. You're correct in
pervades
respect to
all
governance.
of
Yes.
this stuff.
Okay. We'll.
Us treasuries.
Pretty soon with all Chinese bonds.
If there are no other questions on the financials, I'd like to move off to the management letter.
Half a minute. You can't get rid of me, Mike. Sorry. Page 35. There is a statement here that the currency markets have proven to be good diversifiers in a portfolio context. You really want to say that?
Page 30, okay.
In a financial statement goes out to investors? Why do you think it's...
George, you want to speak?
If I were reviewing this in a prospectus, I would say, get it out of there. You don't have to live or die on that. But,
Okay, noted, I'm not,
and I don't know that that's, part of what you do sometimes is you look at whether the U.S. company, where it's a U.S. company, has a huge currency exposure by what its business has done overseas. And that's one of the diversifiers. You're,
I mean,
it's up to you.
yeah, it's definitely, diversity, it's also exposure, but.
I don't disagree, but it's the qualifier there.
Are you reacting to the word good?
Yes.
Okay. Noted. We'll look at
And
the qualifier.
you get, again, to my point, on page 36, you define foreign currency exposure. I am willing to be comfortable that one or more of your equity investments in a U.S. company is in a company which has an enormous foreign currency exposure and sometimes has big swings in its earnings. So do you want to qualify foreign currency exposure by saying something that gives you room to say that at some point?
Well, this is specifically where I think the assets, liquidity of these investments are in foreign currencies.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, large companies have cash in foreign currencies, but you would think that, they, per se, are just keeping cash for very
No,
short
there are
term.
companies with huge investments overseas, and when the currencies fluctuate, they have sizable reductions to their balance sheets. So, look, if you don't want,
Okay.
forgive me, Mike, that's the lawyer in me who says if you write these things, you want to be careful. I'll stop, Mike.
Okay, if there are no further questions about the financials, I'd like to move to the management letter.
I just had one more, Mike, and I'm sorry, I forgot. What is your guaranteed interest rate now for the TDA, 7.5%?
7% for
Seven?
UFT members.
I'm
yeah.
sorry?
7% for UFT members, 8.25%.
For new members?
For UFT members.
The old members?
Just for United Federation of Teacher
Oh.
in the contract.
It's a wonderful thing. It just costs the city a fortune,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Any comments about the management letter?
Find it.
Yeah, I have one in the sense, there seems to be a number of items still left over from prior years.
Yeah. I mean, the auditor could, speak to that, anything that, which they had, which was commented on, obviously want to see that it was resolved to their satisfactions. I mean, there's been progress on these items. Let's see. I think, it's basically, we had from the prior year, account review and recertification, which has to do with the Active Directory, and we've been working on changing the Active Directory. 30% of our logins have been changed to it, but it takes time. So that's about the Active Directory. The next one was about network administrator and password management. So we just had an RFP in February for that item. The issue of transporting checks was just resolved with the control also in
So
February.
most of these have been resolved since the end of
then?
last year.
Well, but it will take
No,
time.
because-
It's up to.
These were communicated back in November, so there have been progress since November.
Okay, good.
Progress, but yeah, but whether, we'll figure out if they're there, still there. I
We
mean,
still have to audit the
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have one question for the auditors, and every one of these is the cyber insurance.
Yeah.
Could you just briefly explain, from your point of view, what that is?
Well, given the, the issue with cyber security today, I think one has to look at all the protections that are out there. We're not insurance experts. We're really recommending that this is an option. So you're either going to self-insure, or you're going to go out and either add to a policy that you already have. Given the issues with data breach today, I think the main issue, in my opinion, is defining what that breach is. How do you define a breach? So I think each one of the pensions, or maybe collectively, they can take a look at that and see what that is. But a lot of, I know, other agencies have chosen to self-insure, but I don't think, one has to define that risk first. How long you're without the system, whether it's a denial of service, whether it's a hack and you're down, or you lose your accounting system, et cetera. So I think you have to define it, though. There are a lot of general policies. Again, I'm not an expert in insurance, but it's worth taking a look
Yeah, I
at.
mean, there's multiple risks, so you're saying just identify what those risks are and look.
Correct.
Now, are the trustees of the funds indemnified by whom?
I wouldn't know
The
that.
city or the fund itself?
Sure. If we were sued?
No, we can't hear your answer.
No,
You have thousands and thousands of people who have investments in the funds.
right.
And if one of them decides that something's gone wrong, and, for example, all the personnel information about everybody who's a beneficiary is out there, and decides to say the trustees didn't discharge their duties properly, if I were a trustee, I'd like to know that somebody was covering me. Is there such an arrangement for the trustees? Are you indemnified by the city? Probably not.
I mean,
I'm not sure about
What would happen, I mean, obviously, that's, I guess, part of the reason why they're asking for us to look into insurance. But I don't know.
I think Mark's question's separate, but I think that might be something that we could ask from the law department, Mark, as far as getting clarity regarding indemnity for, and what the procedure is for board members, and under what circumstances they are indemnified for the actions that they're taking.
No, the difference between, we're a city instrumentality in a sense at this committee, but they're a separate organization, and whether or not the city would have the obligation, well, you asked the question. If I were a trustee, I'd sure want the answer to that question.
If I had to guess, I'd guess it's the city. No, if I had to guess, I'd guess it's the city. Otherwise, they wouldn't want to serve as trustees. I really mean it.
Okay. If there are no other questions about the management letter, I'd like to thank you for coming this morning.
You're welcome, thanks.
I'll give you,
Mark has a lot of comments.
I'll give you the document scrap. You can play with it.
That'd be great.
Which one? I'll give them all to March Paneth when they're done. And you can tell your partner you put a few lowercase t's in just to get me.
We shouldn't have been putting lowercase t's.
I know, they're there.
No, he tests them because he'll leave one out intentionally.
Nobody looks at these indemnification things until something hits, and all of a sudden, everybody runs for cover.
The Board of Ed.
No, Mark was gonna give me all of his.
And I think,
Or that you will never be sued.
I don't know if ever you heard the quote, our firm put out something on these issues some time ago, and they quote some guru in the field, but not a big company. There are those companies that know they've been hacked.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourselves?
My name is Jean-Daniel Demond. I'm the Director of Finance for Buzz, and with me Chitra.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chitra Subramaniam. I'm the Accounting Unit Chief, Financial Reporting.
We can't.
Yeah.
Hello.
Now you're surrounded on it.
Hello, good morning. I'm Chitra Subramaniam, Accounting Unit Chief, BURS. Thank you.
Which one is this?
Would you like to make a few comments about BURS?
Yes. I can say fiscal year 2017 was a good year for Buzz. Our asset grew to $6 billion. It's a jump of $800 million from 2016. And this is really due to the strong investment performance. Our return on investment was around 14.05%. And the membership continued to stand around 50,000 members. But we're seeing a shift in the composition of our membership from active to retirees. Our liabilities on the QPP side is the bigger portion is really toward obligation to the TDA, which is also growing by almost 12%. Buzz members continue to contribute to the TDA. There was an 11% increase in the contribution. But again, as the active population is decreasing, we saw a slight decrease in the contribution to the QPP. The biggest thing for Buzz, though, is in terms of technology. Buzz recently built up a new system, ERP software, and that went live May of last year. And we still have growing pains. We still have bugs issues to deal with, to wrestle with. It's a big system. It's something that we're trying to put together, but it's working. We have big hope for it. And also right now, the accounting software, we used to use Phoneware, and we're about to change it. We're about to send an RFP pretty soon, maybe by next week. That RFP should be out. And we'll replace Phoneware because Phoneware is no longer supported by the vendor. So it's definitely we need a new accounting software. And that's some Buzz activities.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions regarding Burr's financials?
Yeah, Mike, if I may, if you turn to page 21, you say that all the bank accounts are fully insured because it's up to 25,000 per member. I didn't know that was the case. I thought this was your fund was one member. Are you saying that each of the members, each of the pensioners is a member for FDIC purposes? I don't think that's right. I wish I had a chance to look it up, but
Okay, I will look it up again, but that was our understanding, that the
each
250...
pensioner is a member for this purpose.
I think so.
What?
I think so.
You think so?
Yes.
Well, let's be sure. And then on page 5, there's something that, it says that the contributions are up, and the contribution, the 17 contributions primarily due to an actuarial loss.
Is it on page 5?
Yeah. And the increase,
No, we're talking about the employer contribution.
yeah. So what you're saying is there was an actuarial loss in that year, and that's why the contribution went up so much.
Okay.
I guess that's what it does. Okay. I have nothing else, Mike.
If there are no other questions about the financials, I'd like to move off to the management letter.
Before you do, Mike, I would just
Good for you, Bernie.
jump to
Somebody else
page
did it.
36. So where it's very nice where you lay it out on top, projected salary increases in general merit and promotion, 3%. Does that include inflation adjustments too, or just merit and promotion?
Hey, look at the footnote, but the asterisk, Bernie.
Well, that's the thing. He shouldn't do it that way.
Oh, okay.
It is confusing. And we have an actuarial report today where he talks of 2.5% on inflation, and he doesn't talk about merit and promotion. Speak up.
I can answer that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The 3% salary increases are a combination of inflation plus merit and promotion increases.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Any questions on the management letter?
No, I was just, and then, Mike, if you will,
Okay.
a little further on page 36, I was just looking at the asset allocation. A lot of equities. Okay. Okay. I guess, Mr. Jeter, on the alternatives, kind of that 25% rule applies, I guess.
So, there are,
I
there's a
think so.
portion of alternatives that's
no, I
part
think
of
I'm
the
right.
allowed securities, but most of the alternatives
Okay.
would be part of the
They're really
25%.
private funds.
Go ahead, Mike.
Regarding the management letter, same comment. I guess Mark's Paniff, they addressed them all over the course of this year, the old.
Well, once we go in to do our audit, again, these are as of the communication that was in November to the committee. Yeah, and so as of that date was when management's responses were applicable. So one of the first stages in our planning, as we go in for June 30th, 2018, we follow up on all of these.
Okay.
The one, I had a partner who taught me the concept of big hole, very deep. And on page 10, you're referring to all these operational things that need, you hire a consultant. There's great risk if one of those things goes wrong, isn't there?
Data restore.
And
So that's the data restore testing?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, all that is, it's a it's a comprehensive thought to think of disaster recovery under the larger umbrella of cyber security, which includes data backup and data restore. If you back up and you don't, on the backup side, there should be a lot of detail of exactly how things are backed up, whether it's the data in the pension system or the data in the accounting system or access to PHI or PII data. Obviously, those are critical. But if you don't test the restore, which is part of the testing of the business continuity system, then you may get to the stage where you're going to try to fail over or recover, and you can't.
Well-
So best to be prepared for that.
What I'm suggesting is that
Yeah.
you said it last year, and now we're hearing that there won't the services don't begin until 19, and can't that be accelerated? The risk may be small, but if it happens, it'll be
That's the
very
system.
damaging.
I think it should be accelerated. I think everything should be accelerated.
We have hired someone in order to help us with that, to make sure that those
You say the service
security.
is not beginning until fiscal 19.
Yes, but we have hired someone, and then to try to analyze everything, and then really to
You
put,
actually hired somebody?
yes. Within internal staff, and who will contract, if need be, an outside person.
Let me just say this, if something goes wrong because you didn't do it fast enough, you're all going to be very embarrassed. And I would urge that you take, it's a very little thing, but if it goes wrong, you stop paying people. And that's not going to be good. And I would, listen, I'm only the Greek chorus here, I'm not the actor, but I would urge you to think about doing it faster.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Are there any other comments about the management letter? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on to NICES.
Nice. Nah, I want to go, you're the chairman now, I'll get it.
I'll bet it. I'll be faster than you.
That's not nice. Nice. Yeah. Everybody is reluctant to get into the weeds in this data recovery. It is critical. So you're out of business. And
What are we doing now, Mike? NICES? NICES.
no, Mike is, Mike,
Okay. Maybe I'll get a little coffee, too.
that's New York City employment, yeah.
But good. We'll take a slight break, just 3 minutes.
Gunga Din. Oh, God. Now I'll need a bathroom break in a while. This,
No, it's not a traffic light.
this whole area, it's a small hole. But if you're not paying pensions and you're gonna get criticized.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring it up, but a few years ago, when human error, the files that were sent to the bank was recorded, and all the teachers' pensions were canceled. They were made up like the next day. Teachers started recovering bounce checks. They were all made whole.
I know, but there are bad actors out there now, much more sophisticated.
Wait. Wait, I gotta wait for somebody to come back. We don't have, we do have quorum. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Will the members of NICES introduce yourselves, please?
Good morning. My name is Michael Goldson. I'm Director of Finance at NICERS. And I'm joined by...
Chong Gong. I'm leading the financial reporting and enterprise risk management team at NICERS.
Mario DeSanto, Associate Director of Accounting.
Can you press the button?
Yep, we're good. So are we ready to
Yes.
begin?
Oh,
okay.
just, Mr. Chair, just for disclosure purposes, I sit as a representative trustee on behalf of the public advocate on the NICERS board, just for disclosure purposes.
We'd be nicer.
Okay. As you know, John Hartman had been presenting for years and years, and now he's retired, and we're sorry to lose him. But now we have Chun Gong, who is taking over a lot of his responsibilities, and she'll be presenting the financials for 2017.
Good morning, everyone. In terms of NICER's assets, QPP net position as of June 30, 17 reached 61.3 billion, up from 55.5 billion in June 30, 2016. CAFR shows VSF net position as of June 30, 17 at 288 million, up from 5 million in June 30, 16. The QPP and VSF combined is 61.6 billion, an increase of 6.1 billion from June 30, 2016, mostly explained by a higher return on the investments, especially in the international and domestic equity sectors. Total pension fund returned 12.99% for fiscal 2017, slightly beating NICER's policy benchmark of 12.93%. Domestic equity, which accounts for almost a third of the total portfolio, returned 18.09%, slightly lower than the Russell 3000 benchmark of 18.51%. International equity returned 22.69%, and U.S. fixed income returned 3.14%.
My book fell apart, but all right.
In terms of funded status, you will find it on page 15 of the CAFR, as well as in the actuarial sections. Based on the entry age method, funded ratio is at 70% as of June 30, 15, which is the date of the most recent actuarial valuation. It went up 2% from June 30, 14, which is at 68%. Additionally, as of June 30, 17, the fiduciary net position represents 74.8% of total pension liability for NICERS and the 5 ESF, and as required by GASB 67. Regarding of VSFs, the QPP transferred to 4 of the 5 variable supplement funds, approximately 5.5 million in benefit payments. Based on the actuary's estimate, a scheme is payable to the correction officer's VSF in the amount of 281 million. In December, NICERS transferred 90% of the estimate, which is 252 million, from QPP to correction officer's VSF. As a result, because there was sufficient fund, COVSF was able to make a payment for calendar year 2017. Also worth mentioning, starting in calendar year 2019, these 12,000 a year payments will be guaranteed by law. And that's my, I'm complete with my presentation.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding the financial statements of NICERS?
You know, only one, other than the little stuff. If you look at page 41, the smaller funds are way underfunded. And the big one is 70-some-odd%.
Right.
It just looks a little odd. I mean, I can
Well,
understand.
the smaller funds, housing and transit, they ran out of money a long time ago, and we just basically have to, by law, make them whole to pay the remaining benefits. And it's a population that's going down. You know, there are no new entrants. It's just the remaining housing and transit from back when NYSERS encompassed all of those entities. So yeah, we just have to make payments to make them whole.
These are variable supplements funds. They're not
They're not
truly
pension
pension funds.
Right.
And the benefits are guaranteed by the city, but the assets come from the NYSERS main fund to fund them.
Right. Right. Exactly.
This is otherwise known as the skim.
Ugly word.
Yeah.
And if need be, the main fund will bail them out.
But
Well, the city will bail him out. Yeah.
On the last
No.
comment on the guarantee of $12, is that for just correction officers you're referring to?
Yes, that's just for correction officers. You're welcome.
You have any other questions?
No, it's
Or
the same
comments?
comments in all of them. So.
Yeah, okay, Mark will give Mark's pan if his
Well,
comments.
No, you could just take my comments from the other, translate it to this way.
If there are no other questions about the financial statements, are there any comments regarding the management letter for NYSERS?
I don't know.
Find the damn thing.
So it pays not to be the first up.
That's true.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is my pile. No, it's your pile, Mike.
He's running through it in the report.
Okay.
Sign it.
Which one, Mike?
Okay, next up is police. All these guys fall apart.
Well, this one stayed together.
I was going to try that.
After all these years, not seeing Abe.
Yes.
Could you please introduce yourselves?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stanley Thomas. I'm the new Director of Accounting at the Police Pension Fund.
Good morning. My name is Sunny. I'm the Deputy Director in the Police Pension Fund.
Would you like to make some opening comments?
Sure. So as you all know, I'm new, so just bear with me if I don't know all the formalities. So for the Police Pension Fund, the fund's net position increased by $3.9 billion, which is around 11%, to $39.2 billion in fiscal year 2017, compared to the previous fiscal year. This is an improvement on how the fund performed between fiscal 2016 and 15, when we had an increase of $153.4 million. One of the major factors of the net position increase was due to the increase in our net investment income because of the continued growth of the overall economy.
So yesterday.
During fiscal, yes, exactly. During the fiscal year 2017, member contributions increased by 11% to $276.3 million as compared to the fiscal year 16 contributions of $249.9 million. This change was due to the increase of the members' contributions. Pension payments and withdrawals increased as well in fiscal year 2017 by 4% to $2.98 billion due to increase of the number of retirees that we have, the increase of the number of retirees. The admin expenses increased by 2%. The overall, based on the independent auditor's report, the police pension fund was fairly stated in all material respects and is in accordance with the general accepted accounting principle. My last point, I just want to provide an update to the audit committee and based on a bunch of the auditor's recommendations, we are going to kick off our implementation of our new COP system in May. It'll address a lot of the recommendations that the auditors provided to us. So this way we could start off to improve some of the processes that you guys mentioned. That's all I got.
Just for the record, what's the funding ratio for police?
75.19.
Thank you. Yeah. That seems high compared to all the other pension plans.
Or historically.
What page were you looking at?
What page are you?
141.
Oh, that's in the CAFA, but 38. We only have the standalone financials. We don't have the CAFA.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Total is 75%, roughly.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding the financials?
Yeah.
Bernie?
On page 14, sir?
Yes. I just want to clarify, based on page
No, let me
38,
answer the
it's
question.
69.42. I was looking at, sorry again, 75.19. Again, I'm clearly new to this.
On page 14, sir?
Yes.
I know you have a footnote, but in order to receive the variable supplement benefit, they have to be retired. So I guess my question is, why do you want to show active members? That's the potential down the road, or what?
But it's not just retired.
I
It's
can speak to
retired
that.
based on normal service after 20 years.
I'm sorry?
It's not just retired. It's based on after you have to be retired from normal service after 20 years.
You can't be you have to be a service retiree. not a
Disabilities
disability
don't count,
retiree.
and people
But
that vest out
just-
prior don't count.
I just question why you would put down actives when the variable sub is only paid to retirees. It's something to think about.
I could maybe answer that, which is that for actuarial purposes, we project that a number of the active members will eventually retire
Okay.
with 20 years. And we have a liability set aside.
So you're projecting that,
And we're-
that,
And we're funding for those eventual benefits.
and consequently, you would transfer assets from the main fund to cover that?
Correct. When there's skim, there's a skim transfer, or if not, there will be money moved over for those benefits.
Mark?
It seems a shame to strip assets from the main fund for a variable supplement fund. The variable supplement fund, I think I once spoke to you before, when we improved the methodology for the variable supplement fund, and I think it was a big improvement. You'd have to go back. You weren't here there, sir. One of the things we said was, we won't transfer, I'm sorry, there will not be transfers from the main fund to the variable supplement fund if the actuary determines that there's enough money in the variable supplement fund to pay the variable supplement benefit. You just don't want to strip assets from the main fund.
And there is a limit to the calculation. There is a point where more money won't be moved over if you get to the point where those supplement funds are
I
fully
think it's
funded.
something to think about. Some of those improvements we made, there were people here who have since retired, they said we saved millions or billions for the city. Because the initial variable supplement, it made no sense at all. No sense at all.
Mark?
And I personally hate it. Because I was there when it started, when we fixed it.
Can I go?
Yes.
Turn to page 4, please. The last paragraph. It says that there was a decrease in contributions primarily due to net actuarial gain. And then in the prior year, it says that they represent an increase. So there's a lack of symmetry to the disclosure. One year you say you didn't need to do it as much because somehow there was an actuarial gain, whatever that means, because I never understand that. But you don't say what happened in 16. So it's hard to compare. It's not critical, but it just,
Okay, we could definitely look into that and see if we could include the previous year, so easier to compare.
And then on page 19, there's a concept in the second paragraph.
On the top,
Says,
Sue was here.
Increase the amount of ad hoc cost of living. What's the ad hoc mean?
On page 19, where?
It's on page 19, the second paragraph,
On the
first
bill
line.
jacket in the state basically said the city is crazy. Because they.
I think that just relates more to the COLA, but maybe the verbiage.
Then, if you don't mind, if you look, this is a security lending transactions, and two-thirds the way down, there's a sentence says the contract, the funds custodian required the security lending agent to indemnify the funds. Doesn't say for what.
So that's the same comment we said we're going to revisit.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And then,
What is litigation income?
that's the next question. Any shortfall before the replacement cost is covered by the agent. So the agent is guaranteeing the full value of the, I'm not sure how this works.
What page are you?
On page 20. If the securities which are put up as collateral don't end up being able to generate enough cash to repurchase the securities which are on loan, is that what we're saying? That shortfall is paid by the agent? There's a lot of going on in this one
Yeah,
sentence.
we're going to revisit this whole paragraph. I mean, ultimately, it should be saying that the agent indemnifies losses on the borrower,
yeah.
but we'll have to
I think
piece
you
that
have
out.
this
and
all
clarify.
here. Now,
It's a lot in one
you
sentence.
get to the next paragraph, GASB requires securities loaned as assets be reported in a statement of plan net position.
Which we do.
So if we lend 100 shares of General Motors to somebody, that still shows up in our asset side. How does that,
Yeah.
that's what, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Now, we get to the
I
question.
guess the question really is, 1 minute, Mark.
Oh, sorry.
We should ask Mr. Jetta, do we have any limits on securities lending, sir?
No.
They can.
I know it's been lucrative, but
The agent can lend up to 30%.
I'm sorry?
The agent can lend up to 30% of a fund's portfolio. Typically,
to 30%?
yeah, but typically we're more like 15 to 20%.
And that's the portfolio, not of 30% of the whole thing, but just of the equity portfolio,
That's 30% of the
the relevant portfolio.
relevant portfolio.
Now,
Who monitors the lending
that.
activities? Which bank?
So Citibank is the agent, and they're monitored by Lynn's team, and the monitors are actually here.
I asked that question before. Who's
So in the past, we didn't have staff dedicated to overseeing
We took a
the
hit once
provider,
a number of years ago, right?
Yeah. So now we have internal staff dedicated to that
Well,
process.
the hit burning was more complicated, but in any event, the margin, which I asked before, that's where it is. Now, you talk about, here's where we get to the question I asked earlier about whether we are one or multiple depositors under the FDIC.
I've always asked the question, Mark, why do we have to have securities lending?
Bernie,
We're
it's a
pension
very
fund.
profitable business.
I know, but we're a pension fund, and we want to guard the assets for the members. Let the banks lend.
In theory, that's kind of correct because it's counterintuitive.
I don't hear you, sir.
Hi, this is George. In theory, it's counterintuitive to our long-only position, so you do make sense. But Mehdi can talk about exposure and.
Well, just on the indemnification is on shortfall for liquidation proceeds. So if you have $100 worth of stock and there's collateral held, they will sell the collateral. Any difference in shortfall between your security and the collateral that's being liquidated, Citibank will indemnify and cover that amount.
All right.
Mehdi, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, sorry.
They're the margin clerk. I understand that well.
I'm Mehdi Zafar, Securities Lending Oversight at BAM.
I asked this question of somebody else as to whether or not the bank accounts are FDIC insured, and I was told maybe they were, because each account was a different depositor. But here, it says that they're insured by FDIC or collateralized. So are you doing something different than the others?
Where-
The others doing
where are-
something wrong?
And Mark, where are you?
Last paragraph on page 24.
I think you're doing the right thing. I'm just asking, if you're doing the right thing, why aren't the others doing it?
Use the mic, Mark.
If you're doing the right thing about collateralizing your bank deposits, why aren't the other funds doing the same thing? And if they are, why aren't they disclosing that?
Maybe they're doing it and not the.
I think everyone's doing the same thing. So we'll look across the systems and make sure that they're addressing it.
Can you please verify, is it 250,000 per member, or are we collateralizing all the cash?
I think we all believe it's 250 a member, but we need to go back and check that.
Oh,
out.
you were
Okay.
right then. Now, if you turn over to page 25, interest rate risk. The funds have no formal risk policy, that's fine. Their length of investment securities in the fund's investments. This, you talk about fixed income only, right?
Yes.
Don't you think you ought to say that?
Yes, we can clarify that.
And then, I noticed something in the list of currency exposures. The order of exposure and the list of them is varied from fund to fund. I'm just curious as to how you picked what order you were going to show on page 27 as compared to the order shown by the other funds, because there's no comparability. That's just odd, that's all.
It should be in value order, but
It isn't.
It is not. We will check.
No, it's each one is different.
Okay.
Then you get to the alternative investments. And now you're talking about the general partner will evaluate these investments. And you're saying the general partner should. So you're making a statement of what the general partner, do you actually monitor that?
It's impossible.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Can you tell me specifically where you are?
It's in the second paragraph.
I mean, they are valued by the GP, so we will clarify that language.
And then, I'm sorry, Mike, but a couple
No,
more.
that's just-
Page 36, the COLA, it's, on 16 says it's 1.5% annual COLA, and then there's 2.5% annual for escalation, with a capital S for escalation. What does that mean?
Again, I could talk to that. Some members get what's called COLA, others get escalation. Both of these are increases
Yeah,
to their
depends how long
pension
they've been.
after they retire. And COLA is generally 50% of the CPI increase. So whatever the CPI is, members will get half of that as an increase in their pension. And if you're eligible for COLA, you get an increase equal to whatever the CPI is.
Well, I didn't go back
While we're
into
on
it, it's
that
my
page,
laziness.
On page 36, you don't, they don't depict the salaries growth. Am I correct, sir?
I think you're right, I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be helpful to have it. It's a very useful
Well-
table, and it gives a lot of good information.
I think it may be,
No, no criticism. It's just-
the reason it's not in this table right here, this table is the assumptions used to determine the ABO, or the accumulated benefit obligation,
Okay.
salary scale is not a factor in there.
Well,
And we
what
do
is-
show it later on.
I think it might be helpful to somebody who reads this thing without a tutorial to understand, and maybe it's here because I didn't read it after I back, what the auto COLA and the escalation are.
You mean explain how those
Yes.
are used?
Yes. You may have done it, I apologize. I read it and then I didn't have time to go back to see.
So on page 38, the 75.9 would be the funding ratio for the qualified pension plan?
75.2.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we do explain
I'm sorry,
COLA.
sir?
We do explain COLA on pages 15 and 16 where we summarize all the benefits in the plan.
Okay.
I thought you meant.
And escalation.
I'm done, Mike.
Does anybody else have any other questions regarding police's financials? If not, move off to the management letter.
So I want to commend, Mark Spaneth for your analysis, and especially looking at IT infrastructure and the risks associated to the systems, all of them, on these issues. And so, one of the ones, I think that there has been some progress by police to improve best practices, and it seems to have been it's incremental in its progress. There were a couple of them that I did have more serious concern about, specifically the oversight and control of your IT access. The COPS system, I know you're looking to implement, COPS too, but there's certain practices here that are not dependent upon that new system coming online. So I just want to know, what was your, where are you now when it comes to implementing, in particular, number 7, as it relates to how, IT staff have continued access to all users' accounts within the application. The concern remains that IT staff possess the capability to add unauthorized accounts and change permissions to existing accounts within the COPS system. So is that something that you've implemented since this letter?
Yeah, so based on the recommendations, and we have a new CIO, under his leadership, we have restricted that access to all the programmers. So we are in the process of improving that. Our ideal plan is once we have COPS into place, we'll have all those internal controls. But for the time being, we have restricted access to those abilities that as you mentioned.
Okay.
So, for example, one note that was mentioned was the programmers have the ability to change the figures. We limited that access to all.
Well, to add users.
To add,
right.
just to have that ability to do that function, we limited the programmers to have that ability.
Right. And so since according to the note, there hasn't been any network penetration testing since 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if under the new IT leadership that there have been any testing done on that front?
Regarding to that, COPS, again, will help to make sure that part of the COPS implementation process, we do have we're creating the ability to test that. We're also looking into, I know for the other systems we talked about the cyber insurance, we're also looking into that as well to implement those things.
Right, but you haven't implemented COPS to do that yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. So, and have you engaged with another third party to do a test in the meantime?
Not yet.
Okay.
At least to my knowledge, not yet.
Okay.
But it is being discussed. We are in the process of looking for the cyber insurance. We are looking for vendors. So our intention is hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have RFP and start that process. And then I'm not too sure at what stage in the COPS process this will be taking place, but it definitely will be.
Right. Well, I would just make a note that, testing your system's network's vulnerability
Yeah.
is of critical importance.
Yes.
And doing that sooner rather than later, to know what liabilities you may have or weak areas, and to address that is critical.
We 100% acknowledge that, and it's definitely on our agenda. We're working on it currently.
Only problem with that agenda is you don't expect to finish it according to this thing until fiscal 2022, and that's a long time to remain vulnerable here.
Which is why we're trying to look into the cyber insurance, and if I could definitely go back and see if we could.
Let me make a point. Cyber insurance covers that somebody will hold you responsible, but it doesn't provide the service that you need to have available to people. And I don't think as a city instrumentality, it's a good idea to be in a position where you don't provide the service, but you're going to cover whatever damages that people say we've suffered. I mean, I think we owe an obligation to, or you, or all of us, to try to get it done before it happens.
Yes. Part of that cyber insurance, our intention is to have the vendor to come in and analyze our IT infrastructure and any weaknesses that we could have. So I'll definitely bring this back and to make sure that we expedite this and express the importance of it.
Let me just say, I've had an experience. One of my clients was taken over by one of the major insurance companies in the United States, and they put us through what they call industrial, I've forgotten the exact phrase, and we were on the hot plate for 3 months until we got something that satisfied them. And there was only 18 billion there.
Right. And it's just an incredible risk that's unnecessary.
Gotcha.
Mike?
Thanks. Bernie?
Yeah, I'll ask the auditors, I think generally just moving away from the specifics of the management letter and reading the actuarial audit, I think they were pretty satisfied, the actuarial auditor, the way the data was transmitted to your office. Am I correct? There's been a lot of improvement. It's been more automated. I think that's important.
Absolutely. We've made a number of changes where we used to have messengers at certain times, bringing data back and forth. Yeah, we've made a lot of improvements in that area.
Okay. I think that's important, to get a timely audit done. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no other comments about the management letter, thank you for coming this morning.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to move on to fire.
I think that's the important thing. It's gotten a lot better.
You know, Mike, in the private sector, people are scared shitless about this. Because if you are a little bit off what everybody says is best practice and something happens, your customers sue you, or your shareholders give you hell.
Yeah, but it's also how many hundreds of thousands, this is pensions.
This is all the more reason. Well, the one I'm involved in, the insurance company was looking at us, and we're part of their funding mechanism.
Good morning. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
My name is Albert Connolly. I'm the Director of Administration for the Fire Pension Fund.
Maureen Dale, Chief Accountant, Pension Fund.
Would you like to make some opening comments, please?
Okay.
The books are falling apart.
Yep.
I don't know why. All right.
Yeah, all these books are falling apart.
Good morning. I'm going to speak about the combined results for the pension fund, as the VSFs are so small. Fiscal 2017 was exceptional for fire. The combined net position restricted for benefits reported was $12.9 billion, or 10.7% greater than fiscal 16.
I'm sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear
Pardon?
you.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Combined net position restricted for pension benefits report was $12.9 billion, or 10.7% greater than fiscal year 2016. Usually we grow through increases in net investment income, and we were not disappointed. Combined net investment income across the funds was $1.37 billion at close of fiscal 2017. That amount was over 500% greater than the gain of $203.1 million in fiscal 16. The gains were due mainly to solid performances in the equity sector of the portfolio. Or or fiduciary net position as a percentage of total pension liability at the close was 60.95%, up from 56.8% in fiscal year 2016. On the activities side, we reported $108.4 million in member contributions for fiscal 2017. This was 7% less than the prior period, which had included retroactive contributions due to contract settlements. Employer contributions reported was approximately $1.06 billion, 0.6% greater than fiscal 2016. Combined benefit payments to members and beneficiaries were approximately $1.33 billion in fiscal 17, including VSF payments of $47.2 million to firefighters and $21.7 million to fire officers. It was also a good year for the membership. The FDNY hired over 600 probationary firefighters who now contribute to the Tier 3 Modified Enhanced Plan. We also added over 440 new retirees to the pension rolls and finalized over 1,100 retirees previously receiving 90% of benefits. That's it.
I have one comment. Congratulations, I guess, on becoming corpus funded.
Thank you, I think.
Which you were the last system after many years. And my other comment is, what is the funding percentage of fire at this time?
I was looking for it too.
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
On page 37. It's 60.95%, as I mentioned.
We only have the standalones.
It's on page 37.
What page?
37.
I think it's page 46, Mike, I think.
No, it's not 37.
37.
Does anybody else have any comments
I'm looking at the qualified pension fund.
regarding the financial statements?
No, the typos, but that's not.
Hearing none, I'd like to move off to the management letter.
Oh, wait a minute. The only comment I make here is I think this is the only one that talked the rate of return over a 10-year period. No, for the 3-year period, the overall rate of return was 5.7%. I don't remember seeing that elsewhere, but it's very informative because it effectively says over a period of time, the assumption of return isn't going to work out. It's not your problem. I mean, it's a problem, but there's assumed rate of return in the actuarial computations, and the real rate of return over 3 years has only been, I guess, 200 basis points less than that, thereabouts. So
depends on the market, I guess.
Well, what it's telling you is over a period of time, Bernie, the market averages down. And
So Mark, across systems where the 5-year number across systems is about 9.4, the 3-year period happens to include the one bad year in that period. That's why the 3-year number looks very low. For 5 years, we're 9.4. For 10 years, we go back down to 5.6.
I thought I'd see that 5% someplace here.
Yeah. So it's going to go up and down with the market. But over longer periods of time, we're there.
Okay, if there's no other comments, I'd like to move off to the management letter.
Fire pension fund.
So how far along are you in the implementation of the ComVault system? Has that, I'm looking at, for your backup systems, comment on number 5, data backup documentation. A new centralized backup solution using Commvault Enterprise Backup is currently being evaluated for both physical and virtual environments.
Well, even though we're corporately funded, it really hasn't started yet. We're still relying on the fire department's
Okay.
BT
So
computer system.
All right, so your Commvault system that says it's being evaluated, is that being evaluated? I mean, what's the status of that evaluation?
It's actually the fire department has their own computer. We don't really have access, we don't,
Okay.
they manage our system for us, so it's not like they let us know what is going on.
So I guess my question to the auditors is, I mean, were you able to get any additional information regarding where they are right now with the
No.
the Commvault system?
No.
And that's sitting with the fire department?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we understand.
You know, under the, my next question. Was, I mean, again, for data backup, that's again with FDNY. And you mentioned that here that you get that they've applied for the Urban Area Security Initiative grant that comes through the Department of Homeland Security. Do you know where that is as far as have they received those funds from the federal government and how far along they might be on that?
They don't include us in any of those meetings.
Okay.
You just should tell them.
The fire department's a big agency. We're a very small piece of it.
No, I understand.
Pension is a small
Did
piece.
you hear Mark's comment?
No.
I said, if they don't let you in, tell them you won't send the pension checks out.
Okay.
I guess one thing I have is that there are a lot of things that need to be done, and if I had my druthers, I would see the name of the person who's going to get it done, when it's going to happen, so next year we could have that person here and say whether he or she has done it.
They're not hired yet.
Well, then I'd like to have the supervisor. I mean, one of the problems with this audit committee is that if you sit on it, you don't have much chance to talk about accountability. I'm on one board where I'm the chairman of the comp committee and the chairman of the audit committee. And believe me, if there's something in the audit report and it comes for the bonus time, I'm on it, and the people know it. But I don't sense any of that here. It's not your fault, but it just, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but it'd be nice to see a name and a time so there's accountability here in the response on the management letter.
We'll keep that in mind.
Hearing no other comments about the management letter, I'd like to thank you for coming. I have one question for Mark Spaniff. Following up, and the audit committee wants to get more involved in the financial statements before they're actually published. I believe they published the CAFA by the end of December. Is it possible to do exactly what we did this morning in early December at our meeting? From an audit point of view,
Yeah, so we're probably wrapped up at the individual systems in the middle of December, meeting with all those committees. So we had a little bit of a conversation subsequent to the meeting in March asking that question. And it seems like there could be some challenges because we're still tweaking on financial information. Although we report to you when we meet with you in October, that really the numbers aren't changing. We are giving comfort at that point that the numbers are good and we have completed all our audit procedures.
I mean, we're used to, primarily on the city's CAFA, we know the numbers might still be changing. But there's a lot of text and there's a lot of questions. And I do realize we wouldn't possibly even be receiving the management letters then, pretty much just the financials, unless the management letters
The
are
management,
finished.
this is the communication you have in your hands is the communication that has gone through the audit committees of the individual systems. So you would be seeing management letters if it was in December.
So what I'd like to do is see is it really possible to see all the system's financials at our December meeting?
That might be something we want to take offline and kind of discuss timeline amongst members. That way we kind of understand exactly what you're looking for, and we'll talk.
We'll talk.
Okay. Thank you, to all the systems for coming this morning, and I think we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have the actuarial audit.
I just wanted to make a comment for the record. I think the statements are very good. I can recall in the audit committee getting very thin statements for the pension funds. So I made a comment, and the next year, they were that big. So I said to the lady who was the chief accountant, I says, "What's this?" She says, "You asked for it." But I think this, kidding aside, is the right size. It has the nub of the information, and I just wanted, for the record, compliment the auditors for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pulled effort on the financial statement.
No, I don't doubt it, and there's a lot of pressure to get it to the controller by the end of September. Is that it? Or mid-October?
No
Okay.
pressure at all.
It was good.
No pressure.
No pressure.
So we'll take a 5-minute break and then continue with the actuarial audit.
Okay. Mike is a good chairman. He likes
Preston Niblack, Deputy Controller for Budget.
Rosa Charles, Bureau of Budget.
I'm Tom Lohman, actuary from Bolton.
Colin England, the other actuary from Bolton.
And I know asset management and the actuary have already introduced themselves. Would you, a lot of material and very good reading.
We're told this is the abridged version.
Yes, there's a long.
You have the abridged version.
Yeah, is there a 3-page summary, executive summary? What?
Yeah. So what we have on the board is a PowerPoint presentation.
Ah.
So we're going to go through the PowerPoint.
Do you have a handout for the PowerPoint? No, up there was the first PowerPoint.
Actually, I'll start on slide 2. Actually, what slide 2 says is
Just give
Just a moment before we do that. There is an addendum to the PowerPoint that's being handed out. The initial PowerPoint did not include the question and answers, which were added a day or so ago. And so you have those hot off the press.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So again, I'll do page 3 of the PowerPoint, then back up to page 2, because what page 3 says, what we're going to do today is go over the PowerPoint.
Page 3 on your pen.
On the PowerPoint, right. And it is, as Colin said, really, the PowerPoint's sort of in 2 parts, because again, the audit committee sent us some questions, so we've incorporated those questions and answers into our PowerPoint. And what we're not going over today, which you should have a copy of, are these spiral-bound larger documents, and one in particular is the experience study, which is very thick, but that's the abridged version, because there is a longer one than that with all the tables, right?
The longer one has another 1,200 pages.
Right. So page 3 simply mentions that we're just going to stick to the PowerPoint, but there are these 4 other documents. So that takes me back to page 2. So our engagement had asked us to do basically 3 things. One was to replicate the valuation results that the Office of the Actuary produced, in this case for their 2014 valuation for the fiscal 16 contributions. The second was to do an experience study, look at the experience of the plan, how many people retired, how many people thought would retire, comparing the actual experience to the assumptions. And the last part was an administrative review, looking at the data management processes and other policies. So I'm going to cover the valuation work. Colin will do the experience study and the admin parts. So with that, I'll skip to page 4. This is the results of the replication work. So you can see the 5 plans here. For each plan, we show what's called the present value future benefits, or PVFB. And that's sort of all benefits promised for the current members of the plan, current active employees, current retirees. It's called a closed group. It's not allocating things between past service and future service, but so in the case of NYSERS, the Office of the Actuary produced a number of about $90 billion. Our number was also about $90 billion. We were within 0.35% of their numbers, well within the 4% tolerance, so it passed. The There was also a contribution calculation that they did, which is, you're obviously very interested in what the contribution need is. And the question is, how close do we come to that? Again, we were within about 1% of their calculation of the contribution. So you can look at all these numbers in great detail if you want. At the end of our full report, there's more detail, breaking down things like normal cost, actual liability, and lots of components to it. So this is just a summary. So if we go to the next slide. So basically, our findings were, we have a close match of the results of the evaluation for all 5 systems. There were some things that we did find that we recommend changing. This first one we're actually going to come back to in the Q&A part. It's one of the questions you asked as well. Our main finding was to recommend pre-funding some of the TDA money where the guarantee is above the investment return assumption of 7%.
The 8 point, when I asked, 8.25 is what, the old time?
No, I think they were trying to clarify it for you. Basically, it's certain unions that bargain 7% and others have 8.25. So
Yeah,
It's basically BERS, UFT is primarily 7.
Pardon me?
BERS is primarily 8.25, UFT was reduced to 7.
Okay.
There's a small number of members of TRS who are not UFT who also get the 8.25.
Right. So that was our main recommendation, which is covered in the long report on a couple of pages, was to start to pre-fund that differential between what you think you're going to earn and what you're going to promise employees in their TDA funds. There was also some issues with fire overtime, which we're going to look at in the experience study portion, and next time where the actual overtime was higher than the assumption. There's something called the lag method, which again was one of your questions. We'll come back to that in the Q&A process. But the lag method is basically how obviously the actuary takes the 2014 results and produces a contribution for fiscal year 16, a year later. And we'll talk more about that again in the Q&As. So slide 6, other issues, smaller issues, is the prior auditor, actual auditor, was called GRS. They recommended that all the plans have separate annual actual reports. Police and fire already do, and we agreed with that.
Forgive me for interrupting, but when you went to the lag method on the other page, were you suggesting that there be only a 1-year lag for the budgeted numbers rather than a 2-year?
So we're saying that they should keep the concept that a 7/1/14 valuation produces a cost for fiscal year 16, which is a year after the valuation date for that next 12 months. So that's the timing currently, and we were recommending that would continue. The methodology, however, to get from a 7/1/14 valuation and have a result in time for the budget before the fiscal year 16 begins is what we're suggesting be changed, is the methodology, but not the timing. The timing is what you need and what you should keep. So you get in time for the budget before the fiscal year begins. The methodology is probably not the best method. And I'll get into more detail on the methodology when I get what's in the report, but when I get to the Q&A parts as well. So timing really isn't the issue. It's the methodology that's the issue.
You're not as concerned with the timing because you feel over time, forgive me for using the same word, things will straighten out? Is that it, or?
Well, that's also, this is something that's very normally done by most
Within
public
1 year.
sector. Right, is
Yes.
to use evaluation for the year before the beginning of the fiscal year because of the difficulty with budgeting. So
That's the timing, I guess. It's so
Right.
much data to move.
right. It's almost
We used to-
universal.
I've been around, I was in the government many years ago. It was a 2-year lag. There was a criticism for that, for some more important things even, and we went to 1 year.
Right.
Made a bunch of improvements. And the Office of the Actuary at that time found 1 year too great a burden. So I think they were able to go to 2 years. They had some legislation passed, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm asking is, over the long run, it should work out, or am I being silly?
Yeah. Again, this isn't driven as much as about.
I'm sorry?
This decision about the timing is not driven as much as about worrying about gains and losses and how close it is. It's simply a budget necessity to get it done early. And so given a budget necessity to get done early, the one-year lag's put in. Obviously, the closer it is, the better off you are. In the corporate world, you can have no lag. The valuation's got to be done within the year the contribution's due. That would be very, very burdensome. It's better. I'm not arguing it's not better. So it's really driven by a priority. And are we concerned about any gains or losses or events that occur between the valuation date and the fiscal year? Not particularly. As you said, it will balance out in the long run.
Yeah, okay.
Other issues on page 6. There was a small issue about the treatment of the those $12,000 a year VSF benefits and the escalation benefits in some of the later tiers, how they were coordinated. There were some minor programming issues and a number of loads that should be reviewed from time to time. These are pretty minor issues talked about in a lot more detail in the full report. So that's the highlight of the replication work. The main takeaway is we came pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Colin to talk about the experience study portion.
Okay. Moving on to page 7, and now I have the clicker.
Oh, I can click it.
Whoops.
I already did.
You already clicked.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have the clicker. I'm not safe with the clicker. Page 7, I'm going to start by saying simply, we reviewed all of the assumptions that are being used in the valuation. Sort of the, quick version is we're not suggesting any changes at this moment, but that's because, in part, we started with 2 thoughts as to whether we would recommend any changes. First, we weren't going to recommend any changes in the first round unless the change, 1, was to a significant assumption, one that had a significant impact on the liabilities. For example, the accidental disability assumption is like a feather on the back of a flea on the dog. It has no impact on anything. If it was something that would affect the dog in the first place, then we might have suggested a change. And the second thing was that the assumption had to be significantly off what the experience was. And while we did find some where there were significant variance between the assumption and the experience, it was generally with assumptions that made virtually no difference to the impact, to the financial results. So we're not recommending any suggestions at this moment. We probably will be with the next round of our analysis. We did have some changes in the methods that we were using to analyze the assumptions. One was in how we were analyzing the overtime. Overtime was previously analyzed relative to the year's pay, but we looked at it and said, well, your end-of-year pay is what you're making at the end of the year, not during the year. Your overtime is really going to be based on your pay throughout the year because you're going to be working overtime, not all in the last week when you get your big raise. So that we should measure the overtime based on the average of the pay during the year. Not having the average, we took the average of the beginning and the end of the year, said that's close enough. So that is a better way, we think, of measuring overtime, and it's something that's more likely to match how the valuation will be done. Secondly, we use something called confidence intervals to analyze which assumptions require revisions. The point of that is to say, how likely is it that this assumption is not matching the experience results in a mathematical way, because we are fundamentally mathematicians and we like things that tell us that we're 95% certain that this assumption doesn't match the experience, as opposed to saying, well, it's a squiggly line, it doesn't look so good. This gives us a way to quantify that. Moving on to page 8, and then momentarily after that to page 9, and Tom's going to take care of the clicker, keep me from harming things. These 2 pages summarize the demographic assumptions. We have started on the far right with impact. Impact is significant, insignificant, very significant. Very significant means it has a big impact on the results. There's only a few of those, like the retirement assumption, or the salary increase assumption, or the dual overtime retirement assumption. And those are the ones that move the results significantly. And then we have U's and L's and M's, and red and black. Red is, of course, things that aren't good, meaning they increase the contributions. Blacks are things that are good. They would decrease the contribution. And all we're highlighting here is things that we might suggest changing depending on the experience in the 2 most recent years. Things that were predisposed to say, well, the last 10 years' experience leads us to think we might want to suggest changes. Here are the things we're most likely to suggest changes. So unless you have overpowering questions and are desperately interested in hearing more about one of these assumptions, I'm just going to flip through this on the next page.
Across the top, so TRA is transit?
Yes, these are the 5 groups of NICERs on this page.
Okay.
So general transit, sanitation, corrections, and the Triborough Bridge Authority. And the next page shows the other 4 plans.
Okay.
TRS, boroughs, police, and fire.
Quick question.
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
I haven't asked you. But, so when you're mentioning, significant, insignificant, very significant, can you explain that a little more as to what ranges that entails? Because I understand it in concept, but, and you gave the example of a feather on the back of a dog, on a flea on the back of a dog. But could you give a little more clarity?
Okay. Things that are very significant, changing those, depending on how large the change is something that you might actually see change the contribution rate or the liabilities by more than a few %.
Okay.
Something that's noted as insignificant, or I don't know if we have any very insignificance, is something that we could double, triple, quadruple the assumption on, and you wouldn't even, looking at the first 2 digits of the liability results, you'd see no impact
So
at
it's
all.
de minimis is what you're saying.
De minimis.
Right.
I mean, it's important to have it because if you were to suggest changes to, for example, the accidental death benefit, we'd want your actuary to be able to analyze what the cost impact of it. But it isn't going to affect the valuation results, and you're not going to need to put in another $500 million to fund that.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you like numbers, stay tuned for next year.
Well, we will do it in graphs because we know nobody wants to look at 1,200 pages of tables.
Right, but to juxtapose...
It's fun. Okay, well, we have one taker.
To juxtapose the insignificant with, say, significant and very significant, what would you say would be, how does that incrementally increase as you evaluate these liabilities?
The very significant ones are ones where changes, even minor changes, might have an impact on the results. Significant is where a really big change would have an impact on the results. Insignificant is we could do anything to it and it won't affect the results. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk briefly about the inflation and investment return assumption, and most importantly, about a different method of handling the mortality assumption. And one of the things that has come out of actuarial analysis in the last decade or so is that there is a significant relationship between income and mortality. The higher the income, the longer people live. It is something that has not been reflected in the past in mortality tables and typically not in actuarial valuations, but you have one of the largest plans and have historically been one of the most cutting-edge sets of actuarial valuations. So we are suggesting that in the next analysis, we will look at mortality by percentage of people, but we will also weight that for the benefits people are receiving. Then the weighted mortality is likely to be a lower rate of mortality, hence a higher life expectancy, because sadly or positively, those clustered at the high end of the retirement benefit spectrum tend to be the people that live the longest and hence have the greatest liability. And so, you know, that's an important change that we're going to be recommending with the next valuation. We'll be showing both sets of numbers, but that we suggest is the best way to handle this going forward. Wild guess is that that might make a impact of 5%. We've waffled about how much.
I'm a 5-10er, but he says
Yeah,
5.
I'm a more than 5.
Does that also mean, though, that those people are likely to be healthier in the early years?
Yes.
So
I mean, there's
that trail back into your medical care assumptions?
except that we don't have medical care assumptions in this valuation because we're not worried about medical costs, just pension costs.
It's on the OPEB, Mark.
No, I understand. Well, it's
Yeah.
a different question, but
Gotcha.
whether or not,
But yes, it would affect your OPEB.
Yeah, that's all it would.
yeah, well, that's a big number.
And Mike, I'm sure, will be thrilled to talk about the OPEB valuation.
Not right
No,
now.
but,
Not right now.
but if we do if we end up making changes, any of these assumptions on the pension side, we will do the same thing on the
It'll
OPEB
affect
side.
the OPEB.
They're tied together.
Yep.
Same people.
Moving on to the economic assumptions, inflation and investment return. While we're not suggesting any changes, and we note that if we compare the results to what other systems are using, you're a hair on the conservative side. And if we compare that to what your investment advisor is suggesting, it also appears that you're a very thin hair on the conservative side. We may still be suggesting in the next round a change in both the inflation and the investment return assumption. Thank you. But we're likely to suggest both change together or neither change. Moving on to the next page. Since we had a summary in tables, we have to have a summary in bullet points as well. Kind of the significant assumptions here that we're likely to recommend changes to: retiree mortality, salary improvement, turnover or withdrawal, whichever you wish to call it, unreduced retirement, and dual overtime. Those are all that have a significant impact. Other assumptions, such as disabled retiree mortality, employee mortality, retirement under reduced retirement, disability, those are all assumptions that have little impact on cost, except for disability for police and fire. And, you know, we're also likely to suggest changes that are not likely to have much impact. And then CPI, investment return, as we said a moment ago, may or may not suggest changes. They do have a significant impact, and they work in opposite directions. Next study, by the way, at the very last item, we are well started on the next study. We will have results about this time next year, and maybe we can get even fatter books for you.
So you're using 2016 for the next study?
Yes.
Yes, experience through 6/30/2017, I think, is the data that we have.
Oh, okay.
When the experience study-
16 is for the valuation.
But you're going further than the valuation.
Right, because we have the same data that
No, I understand.
the office, the actuary has to use the valuation, we have to do the experience study. Okay, moving on. And moving on to the administrative review. Sort of the brief summary of the administrative review is things are generally in good shape. There's a few significant things, probably the fire, who you talked to only a few minutes ago. They're converting from being part of the fire department to being their own agency. They need to change virtually everything. First off is staffing. They will eventually have space, though I understand they don't yet have space. Things like that. They're going through a lot of changes, and they will be implementing their own system at some point. But that comes after having people and having space to work in. They're currently using the IT staff in the fire department. It's not the perfect arrangement. But in general, everything's going well. The data that comes to the actuaries to do the valuation is more than adequate to do good valuations. There's really nothing that we're recommending in terms of that affect the provision of data to the actuary. There are a few things in terms of efficiency or security that we're suggesting changing. The scope, as you see here, covered a bunch of things. I'm going to skip that for the moment and move on to the next page, page 13. And we have recommendations by group here. Starting with NYSERS, they're implementing a new pension management system. They have involved, we understand, the Office of the Actuary in development of that system. That's going well. We understand now that they, for almost everything, are using FTP transfers, electronic secured transfers. They are not using FTP transfers for some of the small groups, which are using this cool thing called a CD that they put data on and then mail, which may or may not be the most secure system. They do already perform a second level of death searches beyond Social Security and have been doing this for a little while. And the one thing that we are suggesting that they aren't already doing is a little out there, and that is doing death searches on the spouses of participants before the participant dies. So finding out that Jay Jones, for example's wife has already passed away, and hence, when Jay dies, there will be no survivor benefit.
What if he remarries?
Well, if he's police and fire, that, yes, you're correct, they do get it, but in the general employees, I don't think it matters if you remarry. I think it ends with your first spouse dying.
And this was just a consideration, not a recommendation, and just for the retirees.
And just for the retirees, it is not something that we know of any other of our clients or anybody else doing currently. But you all have been kind of cutting edge for a long time, and so this is a cutting edge idea that people have talked about, but have not yet done much to spend time and money accomplishing. One thing you'll notice on all the other groups but NYSERS is we recommend benefit calculation changes, particularly identifying some calculations that could be considered standard and setting up some software to do that, which generally already exists, and getting advance approval from the Office of the Actuary and probably changes in city rules to allow that so that each of those calculations doesn't have to be sent. We're not suggesting that at this point for NYSERS because of the complexity and the number of different groups that are affected. But it might be something that even there should be considered for certain of the larger groups. But now moving on to TRS on page 14. The first thought here is that the City University has got a choice of retirement systems, either TRS or TIAA, and apparently the information doesn't show up very quickly as who chose what. So it goes many months into employment before it's discovered that somebody did in fact elect to be in TRS, and surprise, since nobody told TRS, no contributions have been collected. And that creates additional hassles. They're working on updating their SPDs. That's a good thing, and hopefully they'll get that finished in the near future. And here we have the pre-certified benefit calculator for routine cases. That's the suggestion that there be a system that OA has approved in advance so that those calculations don't have to go to OA for them to review them as much as they love reviewing them. It might reduce a little what they have to do and streamline the process. And the process already is a very well documented, thoroughly checked process of how the calculations are being done, checked, and reviewed. So we're not uncomfortable that something could change there. And the same death searches for beneficiary, which we mentioned on all of them, and I'm not going to mention again. Moving on to page 15. Boroughs is a little bit of a difficult situation for us to review because they just implemented June 30th of last year a new administration system. Data has shown up at the actuary's office, and hopefully you guys thought it was wonderful. We've looked at the data we've received from boroughs. It looks like a significant improvement in having more detail and more information available on people. There's more things that we can analyze for assumption purposes. But we have 1 year's worth of experience with that. So, you know, how that'll look after a few more years, we don't know. But that's how much we'll be looking at. There were a number of suggestions here. Probably the most significant was the data security. Part of that is that simply their retirement office is sharing space with counseling, and they have a lot of people, a lot of traffic through there. Makes it difficult to be secure with very personal information. And I think I'm going to skip the rest of that. Moving on to the police. They are also in the process of implementing a new management system. The new system involves the Office of the Actuary, since they're going to be the ones using the valuation data once they receive it. And the last we had heard about it was that it was in the procurement process. So it's early on. It'll be a while before much is known. They have some online member services which they are looking to enhance, and we think that's a really good idea and helps drive towards doing more electronically and less in paper. And that was about it for excitement here. Moving on to fire. As I said earlier, fire's in the most difficult situation in that they're effectively divorcing from the fire department and having their own organization. They need staff. They need an IT staff particularly. And they need space to operate out of. All of those things are changing in the near future. The enhanced internal systems, that's about the third from the bottom, to better track data changes. That's something they're going to implement, but you know, their number one priority was space, and their number two priority was people to do the work. And so that is behind those two. And we did suggest that they're one of the groups that is only doing a first level of check for people who have died through the Social Security death match. We suggest they should also use the LexisNexis system, because while Social Security is pretty good about finding people that have died and reporting them, they're not perfect, and they miss people now and again. And then last but not least, certainly, on page 18 is the Office of the Actuary. One of our suggestions for them was actually, and I think it's something they're greatly in favor of, is getting less data than before, and particularly things like Social Security number, which they don't use for anything, they don't need, and while I'm sure their systems would never be hacked, on the off chance that something like that would ever happen, it's better not to have information like that. I understand on the second bullet point, one of the things we suggested was getting everybody to send them data electronically via secure method, that being secure, that they're down to everyone sending benefit calculations that way, but a couple groups still send them CDs. Those of us who are old enough remember CDs, and maybe even things before CDs. And that was it for fun and excitement from them. And then we're moving on to questions.
Okay. So we have a few pages here. This is in the supplemental handout I think you were just given. So there were 3 questions. So we have a page with just copying down what was given to us in an email, and then a response. So the first question was about the 403B plan, and basically that interest differential between the 8.25% on some of the accounts and the 7% assumption. So we have an answer to that question. And basically, the focus of our work is to replicate the results of the Office of the Actuary, make sure that their methods and assumptions are appropriate, and that they're not going to produce any gains and losses. And what we don't do, what the actuary doesn't do, is we don't design the plans. That's bargaining or some other process. So our job really is, given the benefits that are there, the 8.25, is it valued correctly? And the issue here, of course, is that your assumption is that the plan on its investments will earn 7%. And in the case of the TDA money, it's invested by the retirement plan, and the retirement plan is providing that guarantee. So if the retirement plan is paying 8.25 and it's assumed to earn 8, well, obviously, if they earn the expected rate of return in a given year of 7%, they have a loss. And that loss is then amortized, and that's how they pay for it, sort of after the fact. I would note, and we have 2 pages in a larger report about this topic, and including at the very end, a history of this issue. And the relationship between the investment return assumption, currently 7, and the TDA interest rate, which is mostly 7, but sometimes 8.25, has changed over time. Sometimes one has been higher, sometimes the other has been higher. And we talked a little about the history of how that was dealt with. But basically, we looked at it and we said, you need to pre-fund this. We don't want to have gains and losses. You have a design, great. We need to value the design. We need to value it in a way there's no gains and losses. And there were basically a couple ways of doing that. One way is what we call the term cost method. Basically, you've got this much money. What's the extra 1.25% that's going to be earned on that money? That's this year's cost. That's the term cost. Add that to your normal cost. Add that to your contribution, and bring that in. So that was one or 2 ways to handle it. It's the other way is talked about in the report a little bit, and it's my understanding that is indeed what the Office of the Actuary is doing, starting with the 17?
Fiscal year 18, we have adopted this change that they suggested, which resulted in an additional $50 million of contribution the city needs to make between teachers and BERS, in total $50 million. And we'll see that each year now, roughly $50 million or so of additional contributions due to this issue.
Right.
In a real point here, that will be a discrete cost that's identifiable. Because there's the history of this, we know how it works. We can debate whether it's a good or bad benefit or the whole 9 yards
Right.
about that. That's a different discussion.
Different issue.
But given the fact that it's there, I think it's worthwhile that people really know what this costs. So whatever method we use, I would hope that it doesn't get blended so that someone who's interested in this can't easily identify how much this benefit costs.
Noted. I think that's a good idea. Absolutely.
Because the other debate is just, everybody can debate up or down a dozen different ways, whether this is good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
But if you think it's good, we should be able to see the value of it, and then people could go on and do their discussion with the known cost.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
As I recollect, it'll take an act of the legislature to get rid of that, right?
It took an act of the legislator to put it in place.
Yeah.
It's an unusual negotiated benefit that we then go to the state legislature and ask them to implement in law. And then when we negotiate it again, we go back to the state legislature and ask them to change what they previously did. So when we see this going up from 7 to 8.25 or whatever, that's the result after a negotiation process, and then returning to the legislature to get it implemented in law.
Were you, on page 19 of your book, I just looked back, the 2016 replication would determine the 2018 contributions?
That's correct.
Yes.
That is, right now you did 2014 to determine 2016. The next engagement, you'll do 2016 to determine 2018.
Right. So a year from
Thank
now,
you, sir.
when we come
I'm
back.
sorry?
A year from now, when we come back, that's what you'll have.
Yeah.
Colin did point out there was another little bullet on the last bullet on this particular slide, saying if we were to reduce the interest rate from below 7%, then the same issue would have with the 7% guarantees. Yes. Okay. The next question you had was about the lag methodology. And so it was a long sort of question. As I mentioned before, we all agree that going to the answer slide, we all agree that the need is the evaluation to be done, contribution to be known before the budget's done. So that's not the issue. The issue really here is the methodology. So, and I mentioned before too, the corp plans are different. Corp plans, the IRS won't let you wait and do it in advance. You got to do it based on assets values at the beginning of the year, do evaluation, then here's what you got to put in for this year, and that would be very, very difficult. The lag method is again, the funding method is entry age normal. That's not the issue, but there's a methodology of taking entry age normal numbers and rolling them forward, doing something to get the next year. And the lag method is one of a family of methods, I call it, where you're determining a cost, in this case, a fiscal 15 contribution really, from the valuation date for the next 12 months, and you're saying, I want to pay that next year in fiscal 16. So the normal cost you're paying is for that population there on the valuation date on 7/1 of 14. And there are a lot of ways of accomplishing this. The most common way of doing it is simply adding year's interest to a 7/1/14 valuation, but that's not your method. You've got a different method that I haven't seen before, but it still rolls the liabilities forward. And what we're suggesting, though, is that you do what's a more common roll forward method. So you really are paying in fiscal year 16 a fiscal year 16 contribution. You're not paying last year's contribution next year. So the roll forward methodology is you're paying fiscal 16 normal cost, not last year's normal cost. There are a number of different ways of doing that. We understand the Office of Actuary is looking into that now. We were not specific in saying do it exactly this way because there's complexities to it. One complexity, for example, is you've got tiers. And your tier 6 population will be different in 16 than it was in fiscal year 15. And how do you want to adjust normal costs for the fact you've got more people in a later tier a year later? So we're trying to give them some space. But basically, we all agree the timing is what needs to stay in place. We all know that what you have is a unique situation. You have a class of methods that really is paying for last year's costs next year, the following year. The prior auditor, GRS, had problems with the lag method. Talked about a little more in the report, and we agree it's not the best method. The method could be improved. It's fine. It works. It's not inappropriate. It's just there's a better way of doing it, and we recommend what's I'll just generally refer to as a class of methods where you're rolling things forward.
That's the part I don't quite understand. I think we're on board that we're not going to change the lag method because we need that data and there's not enough time in our financial plan process to do otherwise. Yep. But then the change in methodology just kind of jumps too quickly and I'm not quite grasping what it is and what benefit I get out of it, which I think is fine, but I just didn't get it.
Yeah, I think what Bolton is recommending is really some technical changes to exactly how we take the results from a certain date and project them 1 year further. So it's really
refining it's refining the projection methodology, but staying with the date so that we can make our financial plan process time frame.
That's exactly right.
Okay, because it'd be nice to use more current data, but it has been disastrous in the past when we've tried that.
We're not using more current data.
Okay.
Right. If we did, you're right. If we did, just right now, we would be telling the city what their FY18 contribution is when we're already 9 months into the year.
Already into the budget, and it kind of blows up the world when that happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe part of my problem is when I say lag, I know what I mean. And what I mean is the particular method you use, not there needs to be a lag. Oh, yes, there needs to be a lag. But when I say lag, I mean the very specific method of how to determine the contribution.
The lag terminology, that's what the previous actuary used to describe what we were doing.
Okay.
So it may have been a non-technical actuarial term, but it was how he described it. So we want to be careful that we're not moving that time frame.
So we're recommending going from a lag method to a lag roll forward method.
Okay.
Does that help? I don't know. Okay.
That was very clear. Thank you.
Just say lag squared. Okay.
That's not so good.
I'm going to go into the next question, I think. the last question that you sent us in advance, and then you can give us new questions. And I'm going to turn this one over to Colin again.
Well, the question was, in essence, would it make sense to combine all of the systems, the pension data systems, into a single system that works for everybody? That's the question. We thought about it a bunch and came back on page 24, say basically we don't think it's a great idea. And the reason is that while the benefits vary by system, the benefits varying by system is not that critical. What's critical is the data that has to be tracked varies by system and even by tier. And there's significant differences the most significant differences are between the public safety folks and the non-public safety folks, primarily police and fire. But you have other differences as well. The pay buckets, for example, for TRS are far more complicated than anybody else's. NYSERS has this physically taxing benefit. The hours are not really important for any of the systems except BRS, because BRS has a huge division between part-time and full-time people.
A lot of part-timers there.
Most of the part-timers are located there, even though it's the smallest of the systems.
Yeah.
So all of these things are odd and specific to one group, and trying to combine all of those different things into one system leads to a system that's got a lot of either squirrely things, so it allows this, this, and this meaning for the same field, or a very complicated situation. So our feeling is that trying to combine all of these capabilities into one system is going to result in a lot of confusion and a lot of hassles in the process of developing the system, and that it's just not likely to improve things. It's likely to make things worse. One other comment was made about everybody being paid through OPA, but they're not all paid through OPA. And there's some groups that there wouldn't be a logical way to feed the information for them into the current system or the new system that combined all the different groups.
Yes, on NYSERS is probably the most complicated system. It has the most database. So to the extent that that was the kind of a base, you'd be adding some additional bells and whistles to that. But I guess the question also relates to as much as a singular database, but a singular administrative process. We've gone through this discussion where everybody's chasing the latest technologies, and some people have done security, some haven't done security, and what have you. And at the current time, we split our resources of the people who manage this kind of stuff across 5 different buckets.
Right.
And so the question really is, if those resources are combined together, if you will, the brain trust, and its skill sets are located in one place, could we not potentially better administer this? And just as other large data process, FISA has payroll systems, it has multiple systems that it administers. So to the extent that you could use a common database, that would be good. But it's not just the database, but it's really the organizational structure here that if you have history on this, I've heard the same explanations for the last 20 years as to how we're going to improve the administration. So I guess what I'm throwing out is a big threshold question. Maybe what we have is we split ourselves administratively too much.
Okay. Well, that is one thing that I've talked with my colleagues about, and we will be looking at in a little more detail in the next round, and see if there's any better suggestions we can make about how that could be accomplished and whether it would make sense to do so, and trying to get a handle on what budgets are available to do that.
But so the real question is, how can we improve this process that you saw the description of today, everybody answering their questions differently? Right now, that's what we have, and it would be nice if we could move to a more singular, efficient process in some fashion.
Your recommendation is leave well enough alone in terms of the,
Our recommendation through the first round is leave things well enough alone. We will look at it in a little more detail in the next round and see if there's some way that we think this could be done without causing more problems than it's worth.
There were a few smaller issues, though. It would be good if you could look at, like, the issues of some getting responsiveness from some of the groups, like the charter schools or whatever, and transferring data. It's just difficult. So if you could help with that, that would be good.
okay, sir.
Okay.
Next steps.
So
Is
just
that I'm sorry, there's a question?
Yeah, so just going back real quick, I mean, I think it may, going to, Bud's point, it may make sense as many of the systems, I think all of them are engaging or in the process of modernizing their systems, the backbones altogether, that if there may be, this might be an opportunity to make sure that at least for the foreseeable future, perhaps they're all speaking the same language as it relates to transmitting the information to the Office of the Actuary, just to simplify it, and so that it is more streamlined.
Okay.
But I did have a separate question, just as an aside. In your PowerPoint presentation, you were mentioning about the working with the Office of the Actuary about the pre-certified benefit calculator. How often, how often do you anticipate that calculator or that calculation being established? Is it annually, semi-annually,
Well, the anticipation was that there be a calculator in existence that would apply for the foreseeable future, and that all of the calculations that met the parameters of that calculator, with that calculator being approved by the Office of the Actuary, all of the calculations would be done using that,
those permutations.
until the plan provisions change again, or tables change, or something else significant changes.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be a year-by-year process. It would be something established and used until something
circumstances
forces it to
yeah.
change.
So like one nicest group might have a benefit change, but not the rest. So that one had to be changed.
Yeah, let me just say just about that real quick. Historically and up till the current date, every single time somebody retires, the system calculates their pension, sends the case to our office, and we check it. And what we're talking about here, and what we've thought about in the office, is there a way for at least, let's say, 90% of these cases are plain vanilla? Can we just review the program they're using, sign off on the program that for somebody who just retires normally, we've checked your program, and then maybe audit, one out of so many. So we've thought about that, ways to streamline this process.
Is this something that you would plan on running for the whole retirement eligible group, so that it's something that you're automatically doing to check, or is this something you're talking about as somebody's anticipating retirement, they would go in and be able to get a preliminary calculation?
It's the latter.
It's the latter. Now, going back, I have this vague recollection, if you go to the NYSER's webpage, that they do have some kind of a crude pension calculator on that, but it's crude by nature. What you're talking about
It was modernized, I believe.
is to basically update that type of feature.
Right. And obviously NYSER's systems right now are pretty sophisticated. All the systems are. They calculate the benefits. We rarely find anything wrong, and especially on the plain vanilla cases, it's almost, at this point in time, now I can understand why years ago we had to check every single case. The way the computers are now and how sophisticated these systems are, it might make sense that we just review the systems and say, we've signed off on the system, and except for unusual cases, where, that's how we've audited it, just by auditing the system. And it's something we've talked about, and we may get there at some point.
So it would do two things. One, it would eliminate a couple steps and efficiencies, help some efficiencies in your office. It would also give some individuals a better feel as they were making retirement decisions as to what their benefit might be if that information was available to them.
And the retiree would have their final pension calculated sooner. They wouldn't have to wait for our office to check it.
They've actually, in past, you've stopped work, and it's months later that you actually find out what your official benefit.
It could be.
Okay, slide 26. So our next steps are the replication of the 2016 valuation for fiscal year 18 contribution. We're underway on that process. We've done some time this year. And then, as Colin said, the experience study goes sort of 12 months beyond that, the end of the 2016 valuation year. And again, we'll be back next year with that. Be more interesting because we're going to have at least as many charts and more recommendations for change. And then it'll feed back to the replication work. We'll redo the evaluations under new assumptions, and we'll know, what they would cost. And then we'll do another administrative review as well.
Yeah. The administrative review, by the way, will be the last step in the process because we need to give folks time to have implemented changes and before we really get back with them and say, how's it going?
Which does not mean it's the least important thing. It just
It's
means
certainly not
it's
the
just
least
the
important
last thing we will do because we wanted to get started on the other two and we had the data for the other two. Right. So we got a couple new questions, but are there any other questions?
How significant in the calculation and the actual benefits is the fact that the overtime on which in the last 2 or 3 years of service has historically jumped up, and there's an open secret that that's to fund an incremental pension liability?
Right. So they're anticipated. There are these loads, these ratios. They're pretty big ratios. I mean, you'll see loads like 20-some% or...
Yeah, we do make an assumption that the overtime will spike up in the last couple of years before retirement.
Has
So we
anybody
try
ever
to
looked at-
anticipate it.
Has anybody ever looked at that
Well-
from the standpoint of why it happens and whether it should be allowed to happen that way?
And there is in the law limits on how much salaries can move from one year to the next. So there are caps that's in the law, that are in the law. So if somebody's pay doubles from one year to the next, that second year, that entire pay in the second year will not count towards their pension. There are limits. But that would have to be a law change, what you're talking
I'm
about,
not talking,
to
I'm
limit
talking
it more.
about addressing the idea that there's an overtime load that happens just before retirement to bulk up pensions.
Right.
And that's an open secret, as I understand it. And I don't know why it hasn't been addressed.
In what way?
Observing the practice.
Not letting people work overtime?
Well,
Is that what you mean?
If you balance that against hiring one other person
Oh, yeah.
at beginning rates.
Well, again,
Question,
we're just going to value the benefits as somebody else designs them.
Right.
So I think we're getting to the design discussion. What I will say, though, given the design, like I said, there are loads for regular overtime and then higher spike kind of loads near retirement or near disability. And what we focus on, if you go to our report on the replication work on page 9, there are ratios. And what those ratios are not the spike. That's simply the ratio of what the assumed spike is and what the actual spike is in overtime. And there, we're talking about differences of, 3%, 5%, 14% in some cases of the assumptions being maybe off. And then it's more complicated because the higher numbers are the fire department doing a hiring freeze. So we're trying to sort of, adjust, is there a spiked load, which is already high, is it high enough? Or is it driven by the lack of new hires, declining payroll staff, and the need for more overtime? So that's the tough balance for us.
In the most significant areas in the uniformed forces.
Oh, yes, yes.
This is primarily a police and fire, as far as in your classification of significant, whatever.
It's almost exclusive.
It's almost exclusively in that.
Right.
Well, but you can make a business judgment that you can hire somebody to fill one of the vacancies when there's a freeze and reduce the incremental pension cost and have a net benefit to the city.
And when you say you can, you don't mean the actuary.
No, not
Okay.
yet.
They don't make those decisions.
Making sure.
That's a big political hot potato, but it seems to me that economically, that could be addressed.
And I'm sure OMB has had those kinds of discussions with the unions, but that's outside our realm.
So we have a narrower view of what we're looking at.
Yeah, none of us are being made mayor anytime soon.
I did a little consulting on the pension funds at the MTA after I retired from the city, and I remember we had a mechanic in the Long Island Railroad who made more than the because somebody said to me, "What, are you crazy?" I says, "No, we'll get rid of them and we'll start with a new group. Maybe it'll be cheaper." But that's anecdotal, but it did happen. It's unbelievable. And that's something management has to watch. You can't watch it. Neither can you. Management has to watch it.
Well, we want to say thank you, particularly to the Office of the Comptroller. I don't know where they went to. They're here. Oh, there they are. The Office of the Actuary, and to the systems that were all real important in getting our work done.
You're very helpful.
I'd like to thank you, Bolton, for your presentation this morning. It was very informative and helpful. And of course, thanks to the Controller's Office and the Actuary's Office. Hearing, like, if there's no other questions, I'd like, once again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Start again. They said that.
Whole agenda?
Well, if you guys want little bits and pieces, I'll get you on the phone and give you the singulars and plurals and all that good stuff.
Okay. Mike? We may need an executive session.
You want an executive?
Well, Jackie wanted to talk to Jackie.
Jackie,
I
you
think
want an executive
we
session?
got to talk to George Davis.
Okay.
George?
We're gonna, do I have a motion to go into recess for executive session?
So moved.
Second.
So I hereby the Audit Committee will be going into executive session. Back in open session, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
What do you think is the next thing that